Okay, well, welcome everyone. Thank you for coming today. Uh, so, uh, since we are doing demos today, I want you to know that feel free if you're lost to just like call out, say, "Hey, what's going on? Please, yeah, help me." Don't worry about it. It's pretty informal. So, and I'm going to try to go slowly. But let's see. Sorry, my mouse. So first thing I want to direct you to is going to the Iris Center website, which is iris.siue.edu. And then if you scroll down to here under the Explore heading and then go to Workshops, there'll be some useful links for today. So first I link to the slideshow that I'm going to start off presenting. But also, if you're working from a laptop, you can go to download Tableau Public if you haven't already installed it. And you do have to sign up for an account. But once you do, it basically, don't worry about signing up for an account because they don't like email you a bunch. Don't worry because I signed up and they haven't like bothered me with anything.
So they won't spam your inbox with stuff?
Right, no, you should be good. And then the other two things I have here are Excel spreadsheets I'm going to use to build a couple of Tableau visualizations. But before we do that, I want to talk a bit about what Tableau is. So originally Tableau started off as a paid version called Tableau Desktop, which currently costs $70 a month. But they developed a free version called Tableau Public, which really offers most of the same features. The only downside to it, really, that I've run across is that you have to save your visualizations and data online. So as a result, one of the cons that I listed here is that it's not good for putting up sensitive or private data because, you know, it can be accessible by anyone in the world who has an internet connection. But the pro is that it makes presenting data online much easier. So really what it's good for is creating visualizations and then putting them up on websites. And the other nice thing is that since you have a bunch of public visualizations that other people have made, you can look at them and build upon them. So it's very much a collaborative space and program. And a couple other cons that I listed here is that if you're going to create like a print visualization, you're probably better off just using Excel to create a chart, or perhaps other programs that might be out there for visualizations. And the last thing is world maps are kind of annoying in it because they use, this is a bit nerdy of me, but they use the Mercator projection, which, if you're not familiar with, is the more standard projection that like Google Maps uses, but is distorted. It makes Greenland, for example, look much bigger than it actually is.
And that's how I grew up thinking about Greenland anyways.
Right,
It
yeah.
doesn't feel distorted anyway.
Yeah. So if you want an accurate map, you're better off using something like Leaflet.js, which is good particularly for maps, but not as much for data visualizations. And there's other online map tools that I'm trying to learn more about that I might present in the future. So now I'm going to just show off a couple of cool data visualizations that other people have made. So this one is about African American short story writers, and this was actually used in collaboration with Kenton Ramsey, who, if you know Howard Ramsey, the English professor, it's his brother. But anyways, what's neat about this is that you can see how many works have been anthologized and essentially included in anthologies of African American literature. So Charles Chestnut has 79, so he's the most prominent, and he makes up 23% of the big 7 stories, so the big 7 being these 7 people. Of course, that's actually 8 people, so I don't know why they're saying 7.
Yeah, we had a few
we have a few,
minor issues
yeah,
with
we've
that
looked
one,
at this one, and it's neat. It does visualizations, but there are some questions that we have, but that often happens. So what happens if you click on a person is it changes it a little bit so that it just shows over here the stories and when they were anthologized. So most of the years he just has 1, but in 1970, for example, he had 2. then here's another one. This one's about gerrymandering. And this one does involve mapping, but note that it's at the state level or even smaller. So the distortion from the Mercator projection is less pronounced. So this is, I would say, a good use of mapping on Tableau. So here at the top, it just gives an explanation of what gerrymandering is. It does a little bit of visualizations of different types of districting. And then here it shows off North Carolina and how gerrymandered it was, particularly in 2014. Look at this shape of that district. And then down here, it's just kind of cool. You can select a state. So I'm just going to go to Illinois and show all of the districts. Well, that's Maryland, not Illinois. Come on. One downside about Tableau too is sometimes with these like big complex visualizations, it can get a bit slow. So yeah, so you can see this is the 90th Congress, which was from the 60s, and you can select which Congress you want to show. This is 79 to 80 Congress, and this is not the current Congress, but the Congress right before the current one. And you can highlight over the district. Yes, so you can see here how Madison County is divided between essentially 3 districts. And the one that Edwardsville is in particular snakes all the way down to grab Edwardsville and then goes all the way back up into the middle of the state. But anyways, I'll keep going. You feel free to check these out more in depth on your own if you'd like. And then this last one that's kind of complicated. It's interesting because, oh, that's not it. Sorry about that. I'll just do a quick search. Oh, shoot. As you can see, the Tableau search isn't very good. Well, we won't worry about that one. What's interesting about this one is it's more narrative based. It's kind of hard to tell by the screenshot. If we have time at the end, I'll try to look for it. But it's like talks about how you wake up in the rainforest and you discover all these things. Sorry that that didn't work. And then this last one that I have shared is a more simplistic visualization. And this one was actually featured in a news story in the Sydney Morning Herald, a journalist made about the Olympics. And she made a series of charts in the article. So here it's adjusting the number of medals by population size, in which case the Bahamas actually had the most medals because they had a small population but a lot of medals. So you highlight over it and you can see a little bit more information when you highlight, which is that there's 0.39 million people in the Bahamas and the medals per capita is 25.7. And then you can scroll down and see some other charts too. Okay. Thank you, Katie. Yeah, oftentimes you're better off just Googling things than using the built-in website search. Here we go. So here you go. You wake up in the middle of the jungle with no memory of how you got there. And even if you click these earplugs, it says that you're wearing earplugs. And if you click them, see if this works. Well, my sound is a little weird because I'm projecting, but it starts playing rainforest noises. So you can highlight over here and see where the rainforests are in different countries. You can also see biodiversity. So Brazil has the most biodiversity. And you can also click on these different animal types, so like birds, for example. Colombia has the most number of birds in their rainforest. Yeah, just some cool things you can do with Tableau. If you go to their website, you can actually click their gallery to look at a whole bunch of cool things that people have done. I don't even know what this would be. Yeah. So this one's all about the Great Migration. I won't look too in depth, but if it's all, you can highlight over it, see what cool things it does. So yeah, if we have time at the end, I might look through some of those. So yeah, so if we're ready to go, we can start creating our own visualizations. So hopefully you guys have Tableau downloaded. If you don't, you can fill it out and download. Is everybody good on that front? Okay. So I'm going to open Tableau. It's on my desktop now. So the first thing that'll happen when you go to it is it will ask you what data you would like to connect to. So I'm going to go back to the Iris website like I had before and download the first spreadsheet, which is the Madison County Community History data. All right, so it's currently in my downloads, and I created a folder on my desktop called Tableau, which I recommend you doing so you can keep all the stuff together. So I'm just going to move that to that folder. And then before I put it in Tableau, I'm just going to show you what the Excel sheet looks like. So it looks a little different than you might expect this sort of spreadsheet to look. Typically, you might think that a spreadsheet showing population by decade would be formatted so you had, like, 1900, 1910, and so on as the headers, and then you would have the rows over here being the town names like Alhambra, Alton, and so on. But because Tableau really treats each row as its individual data point, so really each specific data, this being Alhambra in 1980 had a population of 643, very specific data point as opposed to a table where each individual cell is a data point. In this case, each individual row is a data point. Oftentimes, of course, data that you might have or get from somewhere would be formatted more like that table type. But there's a way in Tableau to set it up like this, and we'll get to that a little bit later with the next data that we have. But for now, this is what the data looks like. I won't save it because I didn't really change anything. Okay, so back to Tableau. I'm going to connect to Microsoft Excel. And then in the Tableau folder, I'm going to open the Excel sheet. Okay, so now we're in the data viewer. So you can see that it pulled over all the data into here. And it, of course, pulled the column names. You'll see that you have the community population year. Now year, it's currently formatting as a data type of a number. See this little pound sign. What you want to do to make sure that it's treating it as a year and not as a number is you click the little icon and select date. So now it just automatically treats them all as January 1st and then the year. So everybody got that date change? Okay, so now that we have the data formatted the way we want it, we can go to Sheet 1 down here to now start creating just a sheet. So first, I'll talk about what these different columns mean. So dimensions are essentially data that is descriptive, so like the community name and the year. Measures, on the other hand, is a different kind of data, which is to say that it's quantitative or data that can be manipulated in some way. You can do math to it. So we can start pulling things over. So first, I'm going to pull the year into the column. And population into rows. So right now, it's just taking the entire population of every community and putting it in there. But we want to get the community in there, so I'm going to also put community into rows. Now, at first, it's going to format it weirdly in that each individual community is its own individual graph, which isn't all that useful, and you have to do a lot of scrolling. So I'm going to click this little show me icon up here and select this line graph here. And now it maps them all separately. Everybody good so far? Feel free to tell me if something's not working right. So, as you can see, whenever you highlight over a community, you can see 1910 Alton had a population of 17,528. So what's nice about this is that if you were to do this like in Excel as a print graph, you would probably want to have labels for each individual line. But what's nice is you can highlight over the line to see which community it is. So it's more interactive. One thing, though, that's not so nice is notice down here you have a lot of communities overlapping over each other because they're fairly small. So one thing you can do is you can make the lines a little bit thinner if you click over here in this size box. You can drag the size to be a little bit smaller so that the lines are less on top of each other. Now what I ended up doing to correct for this, I created a final version of this, which I embedded on the website here. I actually divided them into 4 separate graphs, which is 2010 populations quite greater than 10,000, so that's Granite City, Alton, Collinsville, Edwardsville, Godfrey, covering the river, and so on for the rest. I divided them into 4 so that they weren't getting all on top of each other. Now, there are disadvantages to this, though, because, of course, Livingston is much smaller than Alton, even though it's as tall on the graph. So you have to make sure that people can see that this scale is different for each one. But what's useful about it is that you can still see that Livingston had a drop from the 30s to the 40s, whereas Alton had a rise from the 30s to the 40s. So it's an interesting way to compare communities in their sizes in separate ways, if that makes sense. Now I'll show you how you can actually divide those into separate graphs real quick, and then we can move on.
Does anyone have questions so far?
So, to do that, you set up a filter. And I'm going to click and drag community to filter. And now you can select which communities you actually want to show on this. So I'm going to click none. And just so I have nothing selected, and then I'm going to just select a few. Alton, Edwardsville, Granite City, because I know those are big ones, Collinsville, and just hit OK. So now you only have a few. And then if you want to create another sheet, you can either just click New Sheet down here, and now you have a second sheet. I'm going to do it a little differently in that I'm going to right-click this sheet and hit Duplicate. So that now it's all already set up still, but then I can hit the down arrow here, hit Edit Filter, and select different communities. Now what's annoying is that I couldn't figure out a way to automatically do it so that it just filtered out automatically by what population is what size in 2010. There probably is a way, but I couldn't figure that out. So instead, I just manually looked at a chart of what the populations were in 2010 and selected them accordingly. We're not going to waste time on that, but we'll just say that we're going to show East Alton and Godfrey on this graph, or whatever you want to select. So now we have 2 charts. Last thing, everybody good so far? Let me know if you have any questions. So I opened the dashboard here. There's another icon here called New Dashboard. This is where you can put sheets on here. So I just dragged this first sheet and then this second sheet. So now there's 2 of them. Now notice how it's not very wide. So you can select size here and make the size much larger. So I'm going to make it 1,000 pixels wide. And then real quick, I'll show you a couple of ways to style the graph. So color, for example, you can select this color thing and you can select really any color you like. And if you want more control, you can hit more colors and start playing around. If you want to change the font of the text, you can right-click the axis and hit Format, and then Font. There's a Tableau Book font. That's the default. If I want it to be, say, Times New Roman, I can select that. So now it's Times New Roman. I can make it bold. And of course, I can change the color of the text if I'd like. Of course, that's really hard to read, but you get the idea. These, if you want the years to be, sorry, I'm trying to remember exactly how to do this. Right click, rotate label, and then they'll be all on their side. Any questions? All right. So, and whenever you want to save it, you can click the little save icon, and then it will ask you to sign in with your Tableau Public account, and then you can. So let me do that real quick, just to show you what it'll look like once it's up. Sorry, I'm using my password manager. Don't have to worry about that. Just to get. And then you can give it a name, so I'm just going to call this Madison County Population Demo. Save. It's publishing. I'm just going to open it in Chrome, and it should automatically tie it to my account. So it's not very pretty, of course, because I messed with the colors. But it's up here on the website. And then if you want to embed it on a website, you can actually click this little share icon, and you can grab this embed code and then put it in there. And that's what I did on the workshops page. Any questions about saving? And one last thing, sorry. If you go to your profile, you can actually click this little eyeball to hide your visualization. Now, it can still be seen if someone clicks the link and goes to it, but it won't like show up in like the gallery if someone's browsing the gallery. If you've used YouTube, it's kind of like unlisting the video. So if you don't want your visualization to be fully public yet, that's what you can do. Okay. So next, I'm going to do this type of graph, which is called a Likert scale graph. And if you're not familiar with the term Likert scale, it's essentially some sort of questionnaire or survey that you do where you ask people if you strongly disagree, disagree, neutral, agree, strongly agree, that sort of survey. So in this case, I just used some sample data, pretend data, of a survey that someone did about digital storytelling and statements that they had about that. So for example, I enjoy using digital media to create stories. You can see 9 people strongly agreed and 14 people agreed and so on. So this one had a lot of agreement, whereas I'm comfortable talking to people that are different age than me had a lot less agreement. And these little circles here are the average score. So making this sort of graph is pretty complex. I followed a tutorial video on this that lasted about like half an hour. So we're not going to spend the whole time creating this from scratch, but I will show you how to take this sort of graph and replace it with your own data, even with different questions and so on. So that data is this sample Likert scale revised data, so go ahead and download that. And put that in the Tableau folder. Before we replace that, you can go ahead and look at this graph, and you can hit the little download icon. I think we have to look at it on the page itself. Here, hit the share button and then copy paste, and then just go to the link. Did everybody get into it okay? Come on. So I think you have to click on the graph, then hit download. There we go. So if you click anywhere on the chart and then hit this little download icon, you can then click data, just to see the data that I originally used. And then you want to hit the full data tab and show all columns. Now again, you'll see how each individual row is its own data point. So someone said one individual person said strongly agreed to I'm comfortable talking with people at a different age than me. And which is also a score of 5 because they strongly agreed. And then the respondent's header is just this is person 1 taking the survey, this is person 2, and so on. And then these two are related to the actual data. Like, when I created this graph, I did some math which generated these headers, but that was in Tableau. Now, if we look at the spreadsheet that I had you download that I provided to you, this was sample data that I generated about a totally different type of Likert scale survey, which is about a survey about someone using a website. And you'll see that it looks like that other kind of, the more typical way you might have this sort of data, which is each individual respondent is a row and then their scores for each question. And we had 50 respondents. So what we want to do is use Tableau to format that the same way as the original data of the other chart. So to do that, we need to open up Tableau, and then I'm just going to create a new workbook. And then on here, what we want to do is go back to data source, Microsoft Excel, and then Likert revised. Everybody got that? So here you have all the headers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select each header, you can do that by holding down the control button. On a Mac, it might be command, I'm guessing. So you select each one by holding down control, and then you can right click and hit pivot. And then here you go. It's now looks more like the other data. Now we're going to give this a header other than pivot field names because these are the questions, or question, either works. And then this is the score. Everybody got that? So then what you do is we want to export this to its own spreadsheet. So we go to data, the data menu up there, and we go to export data to CSV. And then again, I'm going to save it to my Tableau folder. Then I can go ahead and close Tableau because we're done with that export. Now, if you're not familiar with CSV files, they're basically another way to format table data. But what we want to do is we want to make sure that we save it as an Excel workbook. So the nice thing is you can open a CSV file in Excel, and oftentimes by default that's what will open it. But if not, you can right click, open with Excel. And here we go. So the only thing I want to do is to make sure that we delete this number of records column because we don't need that. So in Excel, you right click on the column header, the letter A, and hit delete. So now we only have 3 columns: question, score, respondents. And then I'll go to File, Save As, still to the Tableau folder, but instead we're going to save it as an Excel workbook. And I will name this Likert revised _ pivot. You can really name it whatever you want as long as you remember it. Okay, now we have that Excel sheet. Now, the nice thing you can do with any Tableau workbook is you can actually download them and open them on your computer. So in this case, I'm going to download the workbook that I made. Again, like when we were getting to the data, download Tableau workbook. And then it should be in my downloads. I'm going to move it again to my Tableau folder. Double click it. Should open up. Here we go. Yeah, so as you can see, you can actually get to the chart and see how the ways that I put the data in here. So yeah, so once you're in here, does everybody have it downloaded? Everybody good? So I'm going to click Data Source and select Likert Revised Pivot, which is the data source that we used. Now, at first, it's not going to be happy about it because it's a different spreadsheet than it's used to. So what you have to do when you're in data source is see how this box is red. Hit this little down triangle and then hit remove. And then what you can do is you can take sheet 1 over here. This is from their Likert revised. Click and drag it over. And now it should be in there. Did everybody get that? And then you can go back over to the dashboard, and all of a sudden, it's totally different data, totally different questions, but other than that, it's, you know, formatted the same. And then, of course, you can always go in here, select color. Sorry, I'm trying to remember exactly. So let's say that you like this chart design, but you don't like these colors necessarily. So you can go into chart. I believe it's actually Gantt % is the mark that we want. Sorry if that's confusing. You can click color, edit colors, and here you can see what colors are assigned to each answer type. So you can select strongly disagree, and maybe we want it to be red instead, and so on. You can also change the size of the bars. Any questions about this? Okay, well that was the demonstrations that I had planned. But we definitely have some time left, so I'll go ahead and just check out the gallery, because there's some pretty cool stuff people did. I remember looking at this one earlier. It's kind of interesting because it's all about crime in different states and the different types of crime. But at this scale, like I can barely tell the difference between, like, I mean, I guess like Iowa is lower than Kansas. But like what you have to do is like you have to click each individual state to see what the relative murder rates were.
Is the color spectrum of each of these panels like through time? Column 1 is all shades of red. Column 2 is all shades of yellow.
Right. Yeah.
Is that, oh, I see. Forcible. Okay, they're types. They're
Yeah,
categories.
the different headers are the different types of crime. Yeah. And one thing about Tableau is once you start making graphs that are really this complicated, it starts like loading really slowly. So that's one downside. This one's, I remember looking at this one earlier, it's kind of interesting. But notice how, again, Mercator projection, the top of the United States is straight, which indicates that it's Mercator projection, which is kind of annoying if you're me anyways. But what this is all about is the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare as it's also known as, and the states that chose not to get the Medicaid expansion as part of it, and see which all these individual dots are rural hospitals that closed. And it's essentially trying to make the argument that because these states did not accept the Medicaid expansion, more rural hospitals closed. But of course, there are plenty of rural hospitals that closed in states that did accept the Medicaid expansion. And then I think if you click on an individual state, like Texas, for example, you can see this little line thing here.
So then
I'm not entirely sure what these mean.
the map, and then the histogram, and then these category graphs, those are all Tableau outputs.
Right.
What about the other kind of infographics and info boxes that stand off to the side? Were those
Oh, like these
built
little like
in
text.
separately?
Yeah, you can
Some kind of additional.
Yeah, you can create those in the dashboard actually. So like for example, on this dashboard, you can like create a text object, and you can say this is a Likert graph. Not very interesting, but if you create that, then there's just a text box here, and you can change its height, of course. And like for example, I added this little text box here about explaining what the scores meant, and what each answer's value was.
But it's kind of limited, right? Within Tableau itself, it's a bit limited in terms of how you can. So you can add stuff along the side and along the bottom.
Right. Well, and there might I obviously haven't made anything this complicated.
Yeah,
I don't know exactly how they did the layout.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing that's how they did it, was using that text object.
you could download that.
Yeah.
And analyze and see how they did.
Yeah, I could try that, sure. Because, yeah, you can download any of these. And then let's see. Let's see what happens. Well, this one. So this one used like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 spreadsheets.
Right.
But you can see here this is a text box that they did, so I can actually move it around myself.
Oh, okay.
This one's like free floating,
I
so
see.
maybe there was some sort of setting that I need to
Oh, yeah.
activate to make it free floating.
So there's that little graphic to show point 1, point 2, point 3, but then those are just text boxes that are
Right.
just alongside it. That seems reasonable.
I'm just curious as to what, like, that's interesting. So I just, date range apparently wasn't doing anything. Let's try map. Okay, here's the individual map. You can see that whenever you're mapping something, you assign like latitude and longitude to each data point.
Can you assign zip codes in the US to plot things?
On Tableau, I'm not sure. You might, I mean, one thing you can do with mapping, which you can actually import shape files into Tableau and associate those geographically. That I've tried that a little bit, but not a ton because, like I said, I'm not as big of a fan of Tableau's mapping capabilities. But I'm sure there's ways to work with zip code. So yeah, let's check out some more.
Why not?
Yeah, we got some time. This one's all about prints. So people make these about pop culture as well. And you can see,
Timeline.
right, a timeline and when he was releasing a lot of songs.
And then when he changed his name,
Right.
and then how that's kind of like for people an important kind of pivot point or before
Right.
and after for his musical career.
So in this case, like for example, in the 80s and first half of the 90s, he was releasing a lot of albums, and then they call this drought when he was releasing a lot less. So it's sort of a imposed organization of the data. And this is also a list of his songs by the number of weeks in the top 100. Trying to figure out why some of these are gray and some are purple. I don't really know enough about Prince to guess.